The following vignette is purely fan fiction.
Hey, it's Cheryl. Just left the board meeting at Meta. It feels so good to be finally free. Anyway, I'm about to go through security, so just give me a call when you can. Okay, bye.
Cheryl, wait.
Mark, Jesus, did you run here? Why are you so much sweatier than normal?
No, I'm not even sweating. I took my jetpack. Cheryl, you can't leave. Now that we're not coworkers anymore, I thought maybe, we could really give it a go. Ever since I saw the back of your bob at that Christmas party, I knew we were meant to be together.
Mark,
Let me finish, Cheryl. Look, everyone hates us both now. They say we're antisocial losers who compromise the fabric of American society or whatever. It's you and me against the world, Cheryl. We can go after...
Mark!
Cheryl, I can't do this on my own. You did this. You made me who I am. I did this all for you.
You created an illegal monopoly for me? You bought a jujitsu blue belt for me?
I created an illegal monopoly for us, first of all. Second of all, I earned that blue belt. Just ask my best friend, American businessman, CEO, and president of UFC, and inventor of slapboxing, Dana White.
You gave Dana White a board seat and $1.2 million, Mark. He's not your real friend.
Is too.
Mark, I'm not coming back. Okay, that's the difference between me and you. I can escape Facebook, and you can't. You gotta go down with the ship, Mark.
Fine. Go. Okay? But just tell me one thing. Should I, keep growing my hair out? Or, I like the front. It's just, the back's kind of mullety, and it's just kind of...
It is kind of mullety, actually. You're starting to look like Theo Vaughn.
Oh, hell yeah.
God, that's not a compliment, you fucking loser. Goodbye, Mark. This is the Corporate Gossip Podcast, Facebook Part 2, Mark Zuckerberg and the Curse of the Baby Bangs. Give me a real speed.
No, that was good speed.
Welcome back to the Corporate Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, CPA Scorned, Becca Platsky. I'm here with my brother and my co-host,
Data analytics playboy, Adam Platsky.
Adam. Before we start, I need to thank you because last week you told me to touch grass. Well, this week, actually. It was on this week's Patreon. You told me to touch grass. I was spiraling a little bit, and I just wanted to tell you I appreciated that. I promised you guys at the beginning of the season I wasn't going to crash out over things that didn't necessitate crashing out, and I did. And I just kind of after that, we were talking about the UCLA sperm racing, and the wealthy investors that backed that sperm racing. And it just kind of worked. I worked myself around the handle a little bit. And you were like, hey.
Off the handle.
I think it's worked myself around the handle.
You went over the handles.
I went completely over the handlebars. Anyway, so then you were like, touch grass. And I was reflecting on that afterwards. And I was like, you know what? I don't think that my mental health was in a good place earlier this week. And I kind of was reflecting and thinking, I have to treat a lot of these stories that we cover. I have to check in on myself and make sure that I'm not in already a really tense, stressed out mental place, because then when I'm consuming it, it takes me over the edge. So I did touch grass yesterday. I went to the park. I did the May Day march, and I feel much better. I feel much more aligned.
At the
May
Day March, was everybody concerned with the sperm racing?
Nobody brought it up, actually. I didn't see any signs that were specific to sperm racing, so.
That was probably a miss for topical sign making.
That lesson I would give to all of you as well. Even if you find yourself listening to this podcast and getting really stressed out or anxious, turn it off. Turn it off. At the end of the day, we want this to be a pretty lighthearted investigation into these really serious topics, but that doesn't mean that they're not scary. That doesn't mean that you won't kind of feel uneasy after listening to one of these, and you kind of also need to protect yourself and be like, I'm not necessarily in a place where I want to listen to this, and so if you want to turn it off if you're not there, because I don't want anybody to get stressed out listening to this podcast. But anyway, I just appreciate you kind of checking me there, because I think I needed it.
Oh, thank you.
And I guess while I'm here, if you want to watch me crash out on the Patreon, you can do so. And for as little as $3.50 a month, you get 2 extra bonus episodes a month on various hot topics. And remember, this is a completely ad-free indie podcast. We are completely supported by listeners like you. We do those bonus episodes twice a month. I go down to the courtroom to cover things like the Frank trial. I'm going to the One Taste orgasm cult trial that's starting next week, thanks to the tip from a listener.
Oh, Bobby.
Who's Bobby?
The listener.
Oh, yes, the Bobby, our listener. Yeah, Bob. So lots of different exciting things over on the Patreon. And of course, you get to support this indie podcast. So, Adam, are you ready to dive in?
Yeah.
So this is kind of part 2 of a 2-part episode on Facebook. The thing about these episodes is we didn't separate them chronologically. We separated them by point of view. So you're going to hear about some of the same controversies that you heard about in the Sheryl Sandberg episode: privacy issues, lobbying, election interference, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, antitrust lawsuits, but you'll hear about them from Mark Zuckerberg's perspective. We've severed the episodes in 2. We did the Sheryl Sandberg experience, and now we'll step into our metaphorical blue sequined romper and experience the story from the eyes, the pale blue eyes of Mr. Mark Zuckerberg.
The Sheryl Sandberg experience they'll be playing down in the Village tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd love to see like a drag show where the category is the Sheryl Sandberg experience.
That's what I heard when you said Sheryl Sandberg experience. I was like, what a great name for a band.
Oh, wait, that would be a good name for a band too. Yeah. We both went in kind of different directions there. So I want you to think, as you're listening to these episodes, who is the bigger villain? Is it Sheryl or is it Mark? We last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, when we put out the Sheryl Sandberg episode, we hypothesized that it would be split among gender lines. So women would think that Sheryl Sandberg was the bigger villain and men would think that title belonged to Mark. And I'm curious what you guys will think. So if you're on the Patreon and you're on the discussion, let us know after you've listened to both. So we need to do some background before we dive into the corporate gossip. So Mark Zuckerberg founds Facebook, later Meta, in 2004. He drops out of Harvard. He starts working on the project from a garage in Palo Alto. Just to set the stage, right? We're 3 years post-dot-com bubble. Investors were spooked away from investing in internet companies, remember?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
AOL?
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember
one.
that?
Yep.
So Mark is kind of building something that not a lot of sophisticated business people were interested in at the time. But who was interested in it? Youths. I'm curious what your memories are about this, but I cannot express to you what a big deal Facebook was in like 2006, 2007. You may have been too young, but I was like 16, 17. It was like the first time we ever experienced social media at all. Like before this, there wasn't even the internet. You could get on the computer, but it would just be whatever software was already on your computer. And there were tons of different websites. There was Twitter, MySpace, Friendster, Tumblr, LiveJournal. I had a LiveJournal, and I always think I would love to get the password to that and just go back into my brain as a 15-year-old. Zanga, Reddit, there was like a whole ecosystem of social websites that seemingly just appeared overnight. And after MySpace Tom kind of disappeared into the internet backwaters, thanks to Rupert Murdoch, as we heard about in the Schmuck Session episode, there was a perfectly Mark Zuckerberg-sized hole on the cover of Forbes magazine for the next big business boy to fill. The poster boy for Web 2.0. Here he is featured in Inc. magazine in 2006 for an article called "The Young and the Restless. Entrepreneurship keeps getting cooler and the entrepreneurs keep getting younger. Meet 5 of our favorites."
And who else was on the list?
Other people on the list include Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos,
In jail.
famously in jail, and another 23-year-old guy named Jared Isaacman. Have you ever heard of this guy?
I hadn't heard of him, but I did research after.
So he founded a company that would eventually be called Shift4 Payments. In 2010, he was arrested on fraud charges and faced lawsuits in 2 states for writing $2 million in bad checks to casinos.
I didn't even know casinos took checks.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to write a bad check, like a casino is not the place you want to do it.
Yeah.
I would like to see the casino that he wrote a bad check to. I wonder if it was the Taj Mahal. Isn't that what Donald Trump's casino was?
Was the Taj Mahal, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's the thing that put him underwater. Anyway, eventually he paid Elon Musk to go on the first civilian space crew on the SpaceX rocket in 2021. I don't know how he ended up rebuilding his fortune, but right now he's Trump's nominee for NASA administrator. His confirmation hearing was literally yesterday. Anyway, so Mark is like the hot young thing in Silicon Valley in the late aughts. Between him, Sergey Brin, Steve Jobs, these guys like transcend business. They're the Lee Iacocca's of the new millennium. And a lot of people, including the entire Obama administration, I'm looking at you, Pod Save America guys, had all their hopes pinned on Silicon Valley. We're coming out of the 2008 recession, and we need something to believe in. Oh, you're 55 and you lost your job at a Ford plant, Frank? You're dressed appropriately for that. Well, fuck the Ford plant. Learn how to code. Zip your trap about NAFTA because we have big tech campuses now and they have free food and ping pong and you can wear jeans. Move fast and break things. By the way, that's not a joke, right? This was the Obama administration's stance on these blue-collar jobs disappearing. They were like, go code, Hank. I'm going to do a whole episode one day about how resentful I am at the Obama administration for absolutely bending over and grabbing their ankles every chance they had for these tech bros. And that is directly leading to the consequences that we're seeing now.
Okay, so I'll give you 2 minutes and let's just do a high level.
I'm going to get into it. So there were a few complaints from the government, like one in 2009 from the Center for Digital Democracy to the FTC about Facebook's deceptive privacy practices. And the FTC did investigate. But other than that, the government basically left the teenagers the house for the weekend with a cabinet full of wine coolers and was like, be good. You want to acquire Instagram? Go ahead. Oh, you want WhatsApp? Oh, go ahead, have fun. But now we have to deal with the fact that we have a full-blown acquisition addict on our hands and we have to unwind these mergers in a court a decade after the fact. And if you're looking for evidence of Mark's popularity, I went to this website called the Zuckerberg Files, which is hosted on Marquette, interestingly. Marquette University website. And it basically has every single time that Mark Zuckerberg has been in public on the internet.
Yeah, I saw the emails flying around for this, and I saw you had to sign several agreements. Mm-hmm. So, like, I know you're going to hit on this later, but we might as well hit on it now since it's mentioned. What are the Zuckerberg Files, and why were they created?
Well, it's just a public archive. I mean, remember, Mark Zuckerberg controls the internet. I mean, he controls the Facebook portion of the internet. So they are basically archiving every single time he has been in public and what he said.
Do you know anything more? Is this just like a Marquette initiative?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I think it's a research initiative by a professor at Marquette, and it's publicly available for anybody. So you can just register and you can see all these videos, every single interview he's done.
Apologies.
Everything. All of his apologies. Yeah, I think it's just for research purposes.
Okay.
So anyway, according to that, I was looking for Obama and Mark Zuckerberg. I put that in the search terms. And they do at least a dozen events together during his 8-year presidency. Here they are at an event at Facebook HQ, and then here they are again in 2011. I'm not sure where they are, but they're together a lot. And the early 2010s are like golden years for Mark. In 2012, he marries his college sweetheart, Priscilla Chan. He's the highest paid CEO, and his company IPOs at the highest valuation of any U.S. company at IPO ever. Think about that. It's priced at 100 times earnings.
Because at that point, that would have been 2012.
Yeah.
So they were just starting to monetize.
They had monetized about 4 years before, and they were about to hit 1 billion users. And to be fair, there was a lot of criticism around the stock price at the time, but it definitely created the blueprint for future overvalued tech IPOs. I mean, once one person does it, you kind of pave the way for other people to say, I could be valued at 100 times earnings as well. I mean, look at Tesla. 10 days later, the stock fell 25%. But that wasn't a loss for the insiders and the people with shares already from a private Facebook who liquidated those shares in the first couple days after the IPO. His employees gave him a 99% approval rating, according to Glassdoor, probably because they were paper millionaires at this point, or actual millionaires. And Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, who were on the board, were like squealing with delight. I should note about that IPO too, that in 2017, Mark settled a shareholder lawsuit over this IPO where those early retail investors basically argued that Mark and the board misled the public in the prospectus and inflated the price of the Facebook shares at IPO. But $35 million, that's just like the cost of doing business. Like, look at this happy boy. You think a measly $35 million lawsuit is going to get him down?
Oh, he's so happy.
He's so happy. He's in Times Square billboard, baby. This is the best day of his life. And here's something. I don't think you saw this because I put this in the outline after you read it, but the public had gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over the idea of Silicon Valley as well. Did you know that Bravo in 2012 shot a pilot of a series called Silicon Valley? And here is the description from a Page 6 article around the time. Silicon Valley is the brainchild of web entrepreneur Randy Zuckerberg, of the Facebook Zuckerbergs. She's CEO, co-founder's Mark's older sister, and the company's former marketing director. The series will follow a handful of young professionals trying to make it big in the tech-heavy part of San Francisco Bay Area. Expect plenty of drama and over-the-top action. As one cast member notes in the Valley teaser reel, Silicon Valley is high school, but it's only the smart kids and everyone has a lot of money.
Who would know that this, and then the Valley would come back in such a different way.
I like it. First of all, the fact that it's only the smart kids is really a stretch, but I also like that their most successful reality show, which was also piloted around that time, Vanderpump Rules, is only the dumb kids and everyone has no money. Anyway, Mark was on a complete sugar high for the first few years post IPO. He wanted Facebook to become an online bank, which is like he's I tell you guys, these people have 5 ideas. Social network, become a bank, be president, everything app.
Healthcare.
These people are not smart. Anyway, so he wanted Facebook to become an online bank. He wants to develop Facebook drones. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's their other idea. Weapons dealer. He says that he plans to get the entire world on Facebook. But can it scale? And everyone, for the most part, was like, yeah, sounds good. And I want you to compare that image of Mark Zuckerberg in the early 2010s to maybe 2015 to today. Pew Research Center put out a poll earlier this year. They assess that 2/3 of Americans have an unfavorable view of Zuckerberg, which is actually even a lower approval rating than Musk, which I think would make him the most famous, most hated person in America right now. Interestingly, the interesting thing about this, as opposed to the Elon Musk thing, is if you break it down by political party or gender, it doesn't make a difference.
Oh, really?
Everybody hates him.
I pulled out different data points from that, which was that 3% of the country have not heard of Elon Musk and 6% of the country have not heard of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I wonder what the story there is.
It said it was excluded from the results, but I was trying 6% of the country. That's
God, I'm so jealous of them.
A significant portion of the country. And then I was, well, that might go to the survey results if it was like over the phone. So it was like, I don't know, I don't care, goodbye.
Oh, I see. You think that they were just lying? Like, never heard of him?
Yeah.
6% of people were just like, fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're over 18 and...
I mean, there's a world, if you don't follow the news, if you have a flip phone or something, there's a world in which you wouldn't know who they were.
Homesteading.
Yes. If you're a homesteader. If you're on the Pacific Coast Trail for the past 15 years.
15 years you're stuck on the Pacific.
Wait, who was it that went to like a silent retreat in like March 1st, 2020? 2020 and then came back on like March 31st, 2020 and was like, what the fuck happened?
I don't know. I hadn't heard
I think it was a famous person. Anyway, I will say this. Look, the fact that 2/3 of America is rallying around the fact that they hate Mark Zuckerberg, that's a start. Like, to me, that's a really good thing. It would really scare me if 2/3 of America were still like, this guy's a good guy. But I think that should keep you feeling optimistic, right? Having a common enemy is very worthwhile when it comes to organizing people. Especially when you think about the fact that it doesn't matter whether you cut it by age or political party. The fact that we can all, across basically all walks of life, agree that he's a fucking loser is wonderful. So I said Mark Zuckerberg's the Al-Qaeda of 2025.
Comparable.
Like,
Definitely comparable.
let's put aside our differences and unite against a common enemy way, and also in that there was a president who could have prevented this disaster but didn't kind of way.
Wow. That's a good one.
But now, literally, in 2025, everything is crumbling around this guy. He's winding down the metaverse, which I believe was the first of many psychological ego deaths for him. It was like, I came up with this incredible idea for Facebook and watch, I can do it again. And then he flopped. He's shutting down a school that he and his wife, Priscilla, started in 2016. This is a primary school, a tuition-free private school that endeavored to help low-income families and people of color have greater access to education, healthcare, and social services. The school cited funding challenges. How much is Mark worth?
100 billion?
$184 billion. He's probably just doing this, of course, to appease Trump, even though it's not working, because he's still in the middle of a massive antitrust case that he couldn't even pay his way out of, with huge consequences for his social media empire if he loses. We're going to touch on this briefly in this episode, but I'm going to do a whole other Patreon deep dive on this case, specifically on the history and the implications. He's also, may I add, the new owner of a Melissa Gorga level but ugly $23 million builder's home in DC.
Yeah. Awful home. We talked about it on Patreon. It really is the definition of a builder's home. There's no design aspects to it.
It's heinous. It's The Sims level.
Yeah.
It's me making a home when I was 12 years old on The Sims.
Yeah, I'll say this. What my
Hashtag motherload.
My argument would be like, if you're in DC, why wouldn't you, like, you could get that house anywhere. You could get it in Atherton. Why don't you go with something that like screams DC?
Yeah.
So that way when you're going to a house, you'd be like, oh, this makes me feel like I'm in DC. And you have the fucking means to do it, asshole.
I know. He's such a loser. He purchased it so he could stay in Trump's inner orbit, but also likely because he needs to save on jet fuel, because he's now a repeat guest at hearings on Capitol Hill, where he, famously terrible public speaker, continues to just get up on Capitol Hill and eat a dick. And I have some clips that I want to show here that really cracked me up. Here's a time when he testified about child safety on Facebook. This is Senator Marsha Blackburn questioning.
It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this country.
Senator, that's ridiculous.
No,
S-
it
Senator,
is not ridiculous.
Of
You
course
want
we
to
don't
turn
want
around
this,
and
we
tell
don't want
these
this
people
content
that,
on our platforms, and we
why don't you take it down?
Here's Congresswoman Katie Porter grilling Mark on the working conditions of Facebook's contracted content moderators. Many have called what these contracted content moderators are experiencing inhumane and psychologically torturous. This is something in particular that really troubles me and keeps me up at night when I think about Meta.
Would you be willing to commit to spending 1 hour a day for the next year watching these videos and acting as a content monitor and only accessing the same benefits available to your workers?
Congresswoman, we work hard to make sure that we give good benefits to all the folks who are doing this.
Mr. Zuckerberg, reclaiming my time, I would appreciate a yes or a no. Would you be willing to act as a content monitor, to have that life experience?
I'm not sure that it would best serve our community for me to spend that much
Reclaiming
time.
my time. Mr. Zuckerberg,
I spend a lot of
reclaiming
time
my
looking at this
time.
content.
Mr. Zuckerberg, are you saying you're not qualified to be a content monitor?
No, Congresswoman, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then you're saying you're not willing to do it.
And then here's AOC who I saw yesterday at the May Day rally, actually, asking Mark about the disinformation on Facebook and how politicians can pay specifically to spread disinformation.
Do you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political advertisements?
Well, Congresswoman, I think lying is bad, and I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad. That's different from it being, in our position, the right thing to do to prevent your constituents or people in an election from seeing that you had lied.
So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies? I think it's just a pretty simple yes or no.
When I watch these videos, it kind of reminds me of like when you're at your friend's house and either you or a friend who's not the kid gets yelled at by their parents. There was something like that made my skin crawl about it. Like, oh shit. Like, and you just don't know how to react.
Yeah.
And Mark doesn't know how to react. He's like, well, no. And he just tries to backpedal and backpedal and backpedal, right? And that's why he comes off so poorly.
Yeah. Here's the fundamental problem as I see it. Look, Facebook's initial promise was to connect the world and usher in this new era of American prosperity driven by tech companies. And now what's happened? Researchers have proven that the more time you spend on Facebook, the more radical you become. We've seen a literal genocide in Myanmar that can be traced back to Facebook's poorly thought out policies, barren infrastructure, and lax content moderation. And in terms of prosperity, I mean, I guess it depends on who you are. Since Mark Zuckerberg became a billionaire in 2012, we have doubled the number of billionaires in America. There is more money in the economy than ever. Remember, like when Biden was like, the economy is strong. He's not wrong, but it's like the way that we define the economy in America is just money moving.
I think you're referring to, it's good for everybody. It's bad for nobody. Good for the economy. It's great.
But according to a researcher at UC Berkeley, U.S. income inequality has reached Gilded Age levels today. Oh, and if you were an out-of-work Ford employee who took up Obama's offer back in 2010 to become a coder, well, now you can go fuck yourself again, because all these tech companies are now laying off software engineers by the thousands. So now we have a company that zapped our attention span, divided our communities, whose data centers destroy the environment, who locks people up in an office in Ghana and makes them stare at child sexual assault materials and animal abuse all day, who's now leading the charge of offshoring high-paying tech jobs and replacing them with low-wage workers or AI. And now what? Well, now there's a Mark Zuckerberg-sized hole on the cover of Forbes magazine. Should be the poster boy of the downfall of big tech.
Boom.
Here he is. I absolutely love this picture. This is the picture from the inauguration. Mark staring very dead-eyed directly into the camera as he kind of swallows his fate.
I like the one where he's peeking down Lauren
I
Sanchez's
love
tatas.
That was crazy.
Checking. That looks benign. If I
The photographer who took that picture should absolutely receive a Pulitzer.
Yeah, I wish NFTs were still a thing. I mean,
I was just thinking about NFTs the other day. All right, you ready for corporate gossip number one?
yes.
Corporate gossip number one is, was Mark Zuckerberg ever that smart, or were we just 19 years old? So I want to talk about the early days of Facebook. This is pre-Sheryl Sandberg. I'm not going to talk too much about the mechanics of the programming and the features and the functionality. Instead, I want to talk about this from like a psychological perspective to see if we can't nail down Mark's villain origin story. So I've been rewatching the show Girls for the first time since it came out about a dozen years ago. And it's really been eye-opening to watch a show about 23-year-olds in New York in 2013 that you watched as a 23-year-old in New York in 2013. And when I watched the show the first time, the behaviors from the main characters, like Hannah Horvath, who's Lena Dunham, I thought it was like completely reasonable. And I thought that she was she was right. I related to her. And when I watched it again this time, I'm like, wait, she's being completely inappropriate and destructive. And it's actually a very cool experience because I can feel the way that my brain has matured and grown over the past 13 years. The growth obviously, wouldn't have been possible without learning from my own inappropriate and destructive actions that most 23-year-olds take. And I faced the normal consequences of my behavior, right? I'd act selfishly and I'd get in a blowout fight with a friend in front of Cowgirl in the West Village. For example, I'd party recklessly and then I'd miss an important work deadline. I'd make impulsive decisions and then end up in a shitty living situation, whatever. All those humbling experiences and mistakes that you make in your 20s when you're on your own for the first time. But for the most part, you have very little to lose. You know, you're broke, you're in an entry-level job, that you can experience negative consequences, an injured friendship, a docked bonus, a room with no windows. It's not the end of the world. You can rebuild pretty quickly. It's pretty easy to get back up from those situations, dust yourself off, like learn and grow, whatever. And by the time you're 35, and you actually do have more to lose, your brain has developed from all those experiences. But I want you to just close your eyes and imagine that you're not a normal 23-year-old. What if you are an extra special 23-year-old named Mark Zuckerberg who created the exact right website at the exact right time, and you are fast-tracked into an echelon of social credibility, usually only reserved for people who have developed frontal lobes? You never got humbled. You faced no consequences for your actions. What if your friend never told you were acting like a jerk because they worked for you? What if your boss didn't yell at you for being hungover because they had already invested $1 million into your company and he didn't want to harsh the vibes? What if when you made impulsive decisions, especially bad impulsive decisions, everyone around you worked themselves into a pretzel to defend your disruptive genius and innovative vision? No, guys, fuck the fire code. Rooms with no windows are the future. What would happen then? You know, would you be 35 years old, 13 years later, looking back on your 20s and realize how little perspective you had and realize how stupid you were? Or if you never had to experience the consequences for your mistakes, could you even grow at all? Like, can we just chalk up these issues to the fact that Mark Zuckerberg is a 23-year-old, 40-year-old? If we accept the way that fame stunts growth when it comes to celebrities, could the same be true for celebrity CEOs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the difference these days?
Truly. I mean, or like they say with alcoholics, you stop growing once you are in addiction and then you start growing again, but you're like the same age you were when you started your addiction.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get that thought out of my head as I was watching these old videos of Mark from this Zuckerberg files. I found this interview from 2007 where 60 Minutes Leslie Stahl is kind of grilling Mark Zuckerberg on the Beacon tracking software that we talked about in our last episode. This was a really controversial feature that was turned on all users without their consent, and it would track your purchases and then advertise them to your friends. There was obviously a huge backlash, but Mark doubled down. Eventually, though, he reversed course and he turned off this feature, and here's him kind of explaining his perspective.
Well, I guess this shows how difficult it is for a company like yours to make money through advertising and protect people's real privacy and their sense of privacy.
You know, it might take some work for us to get this exactly right. This is something that we think is going to be a really good thing.
Not a real answer to the privacy question, more like the canned response of a typical business executive.
Nowadays, sharing a ton of data online has been somewhat normalized, but back then there was a lot of skepticism, and for good reason. In the book, The Ugly Truth, there's a passage where Mark's bragging about how much access he has to people's personal information via Facebook. Here's a quote from the book. In one online chat, he made clear just how much access he had to the data he had accumulated. Zuckerberg began the conversation with a boast, telling one friend that if he ever needed information on anyone at Harvard, he should just say the word. Zuck, I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, and addresses. SNS, which I guess means text message?
I think text message. Old.
Oh, SN, screen names.
Screen names.
Doy!
Oh, don't mistake us for Gen Z.
We're so young, we barely even know what that means. So the friend goes, what? How'd you manage that one? Zuckerberg, people just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me, dumb fucks. I mean, this is why his answers ring hollow, because he's just a straight up bad liar. He doesn't actually believe in privacy controls. He doesn't respect people's rights to privacy. In 2011, there was a privacy loophole that allowed someone to hack into Mark Zuckerberg's personal Facebook account and post pictures that were private to a public website imager. He knows that he has to use this data to make money, to ensure that Facebook can IPO. He's got all these investors like wannabe human being Peter Thiel and morally bankrupt Mark Andreessen breathing down his neck.
Can I offer a contrarian opinion, which is that you just got done in the Patreon talking about how you think that young people should not be judged around their decisions before their frontal lobe is developed, right? So like if you post something dumb online, whatever. I understand that Mark's behavior past this point has not shown us that he takes privacy as a main concern. But I would say taking that message from when he was in college, right? It's possible that he had the intentions at the time to have these privacy controls in place. Like for him to call them dumb fucks, like he was in college. You know, like I don't think he was fully intending on doing what he ended up doing, because I don't think he knew what he was going to do with all the data that he had. I don't think he realized how to monetize it. If he did, he would have monetized it a long time ago, right? Yeah. So I think it just might be like taking one chat from 20 years ago to me is like, yes, it's interesting, but I don't necessarily think it holds weight 20 years in the future to be like, that's how he's always been.
Well, that's what I think is interesting. That's I guess my question for you at the end of this episode is that how he's always been? Or was he a really young kid with big dreams who was taken advantage of by Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, Sheryl Sandberg, who kind of pushed him to continue to lie? Like either whether or not he wanted to or not, when people are asking him, when the public is asking him, when Leslie Stahl is asking him about data privacy, he is lying. At 23 years old, he's lying.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm just saying, like, would he have been honest if he had a choice? Or did he have Mark Andreessen and Peter Thiel waiting outside at the recess courts being like, we're going to beat you up if you don't lie because we got money on the line now? Well, that's my question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can answer that right now. He was most definitely groomed. And I was going to pose this to you at the end of this corporate gossip point. It's like Peter Thiel groomed Mark. I mean, there's a story about which you'll
And by the way, when you say grooming, you're talking about, I think what we've called it like venture capital grooming.
Venture capital grooming.
We've talked about this in previous episodes where basically, we talked about this in the Etsy episode, where you take a really young founder and you steer them in the direction of exploitation. You take what they have created and leverage the shit out of it so you can pump as much money out of it as possible, and then you basically just throw them to the wolves.
Yeah, so, right, Peter Thiel takes him under the wings, even going as far as to buy Mark a new Infinity for his broken down Jeep when they were working in Palo Alto at the house. Like, that is predatory behavior to be giving gifts like that, right? Mm-hmm. And Mark looks at him like, this is a successful guy in Silicon Valley. This is who I want to be like. I'm going to do everything he says.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can get into it later, and we will, but I would say that he was definitely preyed upon for an idea.
I would buy that.
Yeah.
I would totally. And that's what makes this so interesting. Like, I think with this podcast, we don't want to say somebody is 100% bad or 100% good. No, they're just a human being who is subject to all of the influences that any normal human being is subject to, which is why they need to be regulated, which is why they need rules, which is why Mark Zuckerberg should have faced consequences or at least had a regular adult in his corner. You know what? Actually, this kind of reminds me of Britney Spears. Like, I was just reading when Facebook IPO'd in 2012, his dad got $60 million from his initial $2 million investment in Mark. And a bunch of people in his inner circle got a lot of money because they had invested in Mark. And it kind of made me think like, ooh, holy shit. Is there anybody around Mark at the time who is separated enough, but also has his trust enough to let him know if he's being exploited? Or like Britney Spears or like Amy Winehouse, is he only surrounded by enablers and people who want to extract money from him? Could we look at it like that?
Yeah, I was going to pose this question at the end of the episode, but we're here now. I was trying to think through who would have been the correct mentor for Mark at this point, right? Peter Thiel's not the guy. Mark Andreessen's not the guy. Was there anyone at that time? Because Mark really did what he did with the tools that he had available to him. Like the people who probably should have mentored him.
Invested in him is what I'm saying. And then they had like... They had an ulterior motive.
If Peter Thiel didn't invest or did invest, he would have ended. I don't think Peter Thiel is the moral compass you want to be following. But I'm thinking about he's got to be some professor.
I was gonna say a professor of some sort, a trusted professor, a trusted advisor. I didn't see in these early, certainly not in this book, did it mention somebody who wasn't directly invested in Facebook who advised him. So I think we may have a bit of a Britney Spears situation on our hands. And so you can kind of see Mark is floundering at this point. So back to the 60 Minutes interview, Leslie Stahl is now talking with journalist Kara Swisher. She's been covering Facebook for the Wall Street Journal at the time. And she talks about what a fucking mess Mark Zuckerberg is right now.
So do you think that Mark failed as a leader in the Beacon
Absolutely.
fiasco?
Yes.
What do you want to call it? What were his mistakes?
His mistake was doing it.
Doing it.
Period. His mistake was not explaining it to people. His mistake was not backing off very quickly when it was clear that it was a problem. I just feel like you see some of these mistakes they're making very early on, and you worry where the judgment is.
You have to imagine at this point, the board of directors is panicking. Mark cannot handle crisis communication. Facebook clearly has no intention to change their behavior. They are not being regulated. They're not going to self-police. They're going to keep doing illegal and unethical shit, but Mark is not being cool about it. Either Mark has to go, or we have to find somebody else to talk to the press so Mark doesn't have to. Someone smooth, someone polished, someone who's actually gone to business school, who's read a book, who's worked at McKinsey, who's cool with us becoming kind of like a digital organized crime syndicate and won't be a fucking weird little baby about it like Mark. Enter Sheryl Sandberg. And I have to admit, the board is actually fucking genius for this. They basically split the CEO job in two. Mark does the hanging out in the dark, dork programming stuff and fluff interviews where he talks about innovation and being a startup and all the stuff he can actually talk about without physically melting down because he's a bad liar. And Sheryl is going to tackle the big policy stuff. She's the one who addresses the big questions on privacy. She's the one responding to international conflicts triggered by Facebook's misinformation. She's the one going to congressional hearings. She's an actual adult. She's 15 years older than Mark. And as we discussed in our Sheryl Sandberg episode, she's literally made for this moment. She's a huge fan of the spotlight. She's constantly spinning whatever narrative works for her and Facebook. In the words of Scott Galloway in 2018, when she was facing heat for the Cambridge Analytica scandal, he says, CEOs have lied more than Sheryl Sandberg, but no CEO has lied for longer. And obviously, we're not going to talk too much about Sheryl Sandberg in this episode, other than just to introduce her in the context of Mark's story. You can go back one episode and listen to her whole story as well. So now basically the board has said, we're shielding Mark, continuing to shield him from the consequences of his behavior. I mean, how many founders have we covered on this podcast who were objectively better at their job than Mark Zuckerberg, but they got fired for much less? I think, I wrote it in this outline that Peter Thiel is a venture capitalist vampire who targets young founders and basically makes them sign a deal for the devil. Do exactly as I say, and I'll make you rich. So that's one reason that I think Mark was protected. That doesn't excuse, I want to say though, that doesn't excuse Mark's behavior. Like, just because you are influenced by this it doesn't give you an excuse to do what Mark Zuckerberg eventually did that harmed all of us. But I think it's interesting, and I think it's one way we could potentially regulate. Like, founders, do you have somebody on your board who is not actually invested in this outcome? Are you ready for corporate gossip number 2? Corporate gossip number 2 is Mark may have been protected from his own actions, but he couldn't be protected from the biggest enemy of all, Google. So for the most part, this plan worked. When in 2008, Cheryl joins Facebook through the Obama administration in 2016, Mark, more or less, at least compared to today, stays out of the spotlight when it comes to the myriad scandals that cloud the company. He's like, forward those emails to Cheryl. I'm busy interfering with the personal bodily autonomy of my employees. Yippee! And so this is one absolutely bananas story that I think really exemplifies Mark's, I don't even want to call it managerial style. I'll call it the cult-like mentality that was normalized during the apex of Facebook's popularity. This is like Mark's Vince McMahon era or his Dov Charney era from American Apparel. We've discussed these in past episodes. This is like peak brain rot, emperor has no clothes CEO. And so what do we know about these types of CEOs when they feel threatened? If you're not mentally stable, if you don't have the coping mechanisms needed.
Wartime. You revert to wartime.
You revert to lizard brain, and you gather all of your employees into a conference room. You stand on the table, rip off your shirt, and say, "Pass me a nitro cold brew. I'm about to fuck shit up for all of you. Yeehaw, baby." And if you worked at Facebook in those early years, the environment is very similar to like turn of the century AOL, when you have all of these 23-year-old paper millionaires making shit tons of money on top of that. They're hopped up on amphetamines, they're eating all their meals, and sometimes they're sleeping at the Facebook offices. And before I get into the depths of this story, I do want to just touch on that quickly about what it's like to be a paper millionaire and have all of your net worth tied up into a company stock. What are the psychological impacts of that for employees? I don't think we talk about this enough. Like, back in the 50s, if you were working at that Ford plant, you had a defined pension benefit. So it's not necessarily dependent on the company's stock price. It's dependent on when you join the company. And you can view the things that your company does and the things that analysts say about your company objectively. But if instead you have a significant vested interest in the company's stock price, if you're a regular person without a pension and your entire livelihood is tied up in this one stock, because maybe you have a 401k, but you were also gifted, 2,000 shares of Facebook that are now worth $4 million, or I don't know, I'm just making that up, but a significant sum of money for a regular person. I believe that it can start to impact the decisions that you make, the way that you think, the propaganda you'll believe, the things that you'll put up with. And then add that to the fact that a lot of these early Facebook employees were true believers. Like, they joined because they felt that they were committed to Facebook's mission in the early years. And you bonded with your teammates over the fact that you were a believer and everybody else was skeptical. And it turned out you were right. And now you're a paper millionaire. And now, if you were right about that, you're right about everything else that Facebook does too. And so we have a CEO who was at his like peak narcissist lunatic era, or maybe what we thought was his peak. It has really only got worse since then, and employees who were not able to see their company objectively. And all this creates a perfect storm for chaos when in 2011, Google announced what many described as the Facebook killer, Google Plus.
So I think you bring up an amazing point about this. I don't say that enough about the company stock, because I have a comparison to a cult almost, right? Because your financial well-being is attached to it, and you have no financial insecurity, right? Or fear of financial insecurity if things don't go according to plan, and then your entire fellowship is part of the same, has the same thought, right? We're going to get rich together. This is going to be great. We're all along for the ride. So the idea that if I did see anything that was, say, alarming, I might be able to talk to a friend about it at the company, but then they're going to help me rationalize it. They're also going to say, whoa, like, what about all those stock units you have? Like, we have. Maybe hold on to this for a second, right? Or bring in other people, and it just becomes a cover-up, right?
Yeah.
It's a crime family.
Yeah.
It's a syndicate.
Yes, exactly. And also, you're bonded by the fact that analysts don't believe in you. I mean, early 2012, there was a lot of Facebook haters. I don't want to make it seem like, yeah, Mark was on top of the world, but there were a lot of people who were skeptical. And what does that do? It bonds the people on the inside. Everybody's like, you're either with us or you're against us. Yeah.
Yeah. Good rally cry.
So let's kind of take an anecdote on how that actually looked inside Facebook. This is from a 2016 Vanity Fair article called How Mark Zuckerberg Led Facebook's War to Crush Google Plus by Antonio Garcia Martinez, who actually worked at Facebook in 2011 when this all went down in the ads team. Let me know, does this sound like a cult to you? It describes the environment inside Facebook where they faced their first true threat from a company that they couldn't just buy and bury. Google was bigger than Facebook. It wasn't Instagram. It wasn't WhatsApp. They couldn't just buy it. While it isn't noted in this article, I will just point out that Facebook had poached a lot of really high-level Google employees at that point, and there were a lot of angry emails that have since been made public between these two companies. And I would not be surprised at all if one of the reasons Google even invested in this product, Google Plus, to begin with, which, spoiler alert, it was a huge flop, was just to send Facebook a big fuck you. And Mark might have known that, but he didn't know it was going to be a huge flop. He saw it as an existential threat to his company. Google was actually posting insane numbers in the early days. I remember getting a Google Plus account. It took Google Plus a little over a year to get 500 million users and 100 million active users. It took Facebook 4 years to reach those same milestones. And another spoiler alert, Google was exaggerating the user numbers, a la Charlie Javis. But again, Mark didn't know that. So he gathers all the employees in the open office and he pulls a string on a neon sign that he had made that read lockdown. Mark gets all the employees together and he starts explaining to them in like the convoluted, halting and sweaty manner that was his trademark. He's like trying to express the imminent peril of the situation, but he's looking around and realizing that his employees just don't seem to get it. So this is from the article. He changed gears and erupted with a burst of rhetoric. You know, one of my favorite Roman orators ended every speech with the phrase "Cathargo delenda est." Carthage must be destroyed. For some reason, I think of that now. He paused as a wave of laughter tore through the crowd. Not the Roman Empire! Apparently, people were laughing because Mark had a habit of ending every single speech he gave to Facebook employees with that line.
I think we should retire all sports and war references from business vernacular.
Seriously.
I think, as we know, none of these guys are vets or athletes. So I've come up with a few suggestions.
How about some knitting analogies? Are we purling or are we stitching?
I mean, Michelin Star Kitchen. That would be a good one. Beavers building a dam.
I love that.
Yeah.
I got this. McKinsey, Shantae, you stay. BCG, sashay away.
Or sperm in a sperm race, perhaps.
These are great. Comment what kind of new vernacular we should start to incorporate that really are inclusive of all of us if you don't watch sports or if you're not into war. I love that. Hi, team. Summer Fridays will start May 22nd. Carthage must be destroyed. Mark. Here's a fucking poster that somebody printed out with the saying, Cathargo delenda est, under, and I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I don't care. It's printed out under the, like, I guess the Michigan State logo, like a Roman's helmet, Spartan helmet. And these posters were everywhere. So back to the article.
Michigan State logo. Just like, the Michigan State logo.
Well, I've never seen this in any other context other than Michigan State.
Yeah, I like
mean,
it. I
yeah.
love your knowledge of college
I just
logos.
combined sports and war.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is from the article. The improvised print shop made all manner of posters and ephemera, often distributed semi-furtively at nights and on the weekends, in a fashion reminiscent of Soviet Sazmadat. The art itself was always exceptional, invoking both the mechanical typography of World War II era propaganda posters and the contemporary internet design, complete with faux vintage logos. This was Facebook's Ministry of Propaganda, and it originally started with no official permission or budget in an unused warehouse space. In many ways, it was the finest exemplar of Facebook's values, irreverent yet bracing in its martial qualities. And this is basically describing how Mark Zuckerberg declared martial law at his company. Here's another sign. This is written on a chalkboard that reads, "Don't be googly." And the "don't be googly" one kind of gets me because it's so frat boy coded. Like, I close my eyes and I hear Mark
If one of you is using Google, I will fucking make you do a keg stand right now. Mozilla Firefox only.
Brothers, I don't want to see you flirting with any of the swamp donkeys at Google. If you wanted to be a loser cuck with no game, you should have rushed the Chrome browser. I'm going to write it on this chalkboard so you don't forget. So at the end of the speech, Mark announces war. The company is in lockdown, which means employees were to be in the office 7 days a week until the, quote, threat was neutralized. According to Vanity Fair, in what was perceived as a kindly concession to the few employees with families, it was also announced that families were welcome to visit on weekends and eat in the cafes, allowing the children to at least see daddy, and yes, it was mostly daddy, on weekend afternoons. Sorry, Logan. Daddy's in Facebook jail.
Well, mandatory weekend work. I mean,
as far as I know, they didn't get paid overtime.
You worked in auditing, so
listen,
you're more familiar with that than I am.
I worked at a Big Four auditing firm for the first couple years of my career, and we had like a busy season, and we all worked 6 days a week, 12 to 14-hour days for 3 months out of the year. Like, obviously it was hard, but it was also really fun. I bet you these Facebook people look back on those times with fond memories, like I do, right? Trauma binding can be very fun. But that said, busy seasons at the auditing firm that I worked at were a known thing. And you'd work fewer hours in the summer to make up for it. They gave you a ton of bonuses. They gave you perks to make you less miserable when you were going through it. And more importantly, like, we weren't gaslit into thinking that we were doing this for some fucking wartime threat, I'm not saying like that in and of itself is unusual. What's unusual is, and this is the quote, at Facebook, even then and certainly later, you got along by going along, and even sacrificing his or her entire life for the cause was as much about self-sacrifice and team building as it was an actual measure of your productivity. What's unusual is the unicorn startup to cult pipeline that was very common in the middle tens. Facebook, WeWork, Amazon. If you were a millennial, it's not like you were like, oh God, they work 24 hours, 7 days a week. That's terrible. Their kids only get to see them at weekends. Like, for some reason in our heads, we were like, I would love to work for Facebook. That sounds really fun. They weren't really companies even. They like transcended the S&P 500. People worshipped at the altar of the tech unicorn. Their CEOs were our smarmy, charismatic preachers, for fuck's sake. If you look at LinkedIn at the time, you'd see people with job titles like Uber evangelist or Twitter evangelist. Like, that is strange looking back on it. We talk about these companies being cults, and we talk about these CEOs being cult leaders, because I just want to put a finer point on it. The fact that these CEOs were lifted into another dimension was a huge factor in normalizing the massive pay packages that they got. Like, of course WeWork's Adam Newman deserved hundreds of millions of dollars for an office subleasing company. He is not a CEO. He is a saint. He also kind of looks like Jesus. This is why it's so important to poke holes in the facade of these companies who basically operate as money funnels to their executive team and board of directors. Like, don't let them trick you into thinking that they're 400 times smarter than you or work 400 times harder than you, and they don't deserve to be paid 400 times more than you. So suck on that, Kevin O'Leary. Yeah, let's move on to corporate gossip number 3, which is Mark reaches terminal stage brain rot. Okay, so let's move to 2016. So Sheryl Sandberg is running maniacally from CNBC to address whatever privacy or foreign policy scandal has plagued the company recently. And then she's scurrying over to Oprah's Super Soul Sundays to talk about her second book. And this leaves Mark to proposition the president of China and use Facebook employees' arrest for clout. So these are 2 anecdotes that I want to use to illustrate Mark's brain rot at the time. The first is China. This is the golden goose for every CEO. We talk about it in so many episodes. They will absolutely go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs trying to get into China. And people ask him, and they're like, hey, if Facebook goes to China, will you kowtow to them by censoring content and sharing data with the Chinese Communist Party? And Mark and Sheryl say, nuh-uh, no way, no how. But interesting. According to a Meta whistleblower who testified in front of Congress last month, that was bullshit. She said that Facebook and Instagram worked, quote, hand in glove with Chinese officials to build censorship tools aimed at silencing critics of the Chinese Communist Party. And according to the book Careless People, which is the book by that whistleblower who testified, Mark asked President Xi if he would name Mark's firstborn baby. What in the Andy Fastow shit is that? Do you remember when Andy Fastow did that? He named his firstborn kid Jeff Fastow?
Yes, after
Jeff Skilling.
Jeff Skilling. Yeah, that's great.
Imagine being Mark's first kid. Like, you were about to let some random guy name me for a business deal. The other anecdote is somehow darker. I don't know if you can get much darker than promising to contradict everything you say your platform stands for just so you can meet some fucking dumb business objective. But somehow this feels worse. So this story, again, comes from Careless People, and it involves Diego Dozan, or maybe it's Zodan. It's Dzodan. He's the vice president of Latin America for Facebook. So he's in Brazil, and he's arrested on his way to work. And the Brazilian government wanted Facebook at the time to hand over messages from WhatsApp, which Facebook owns, so they could investigate a drug trafficking case. Facebook said no, and then the government was like, okay, we're just going to arrest one of your executives. And so now he's got a Facebook executive sitting in a Brazilian jail. And I'm going to pick up here reading a passage from the book. At the request of the head of sales, Mark somehow manages to get Facebook Messenger message through to Diego, who responds quickly. Here's Diego's response. Thank you, Mark. It's an honor to receive this note. Everything is fine here, and the legal team is doing a great job. This is our part in making the world more open and connected. Count on me! ! Mark loves this, and he emails a few of us. This is Mark's email. Diego's reaction, you can count on me, to being arrested for upholding our stance on protecting our community is deeply heartwarming. Do you guys have any issue with me writing this up as a short story to post on my page? I think this story says a lot about our protection of our community, our culture, and our technology. Everyone's like, what? I mean, I guess draft something, but like, please don't even think about hitting post until we all sign off. So he drafts up a post, and here it is. And again, this was going to go out to all Facebook users on Mark's Facebook page. He goes, I have a heartwarming story to share. To protect our community and keep you safe, all messages you send on WhatsApp are encrypted. This means your messages are so secure that we couldn't access them even if we wanted to, and neither can governments or hackers. Of course, some governments that want access to your messages don't like this. And yesterday, Brazilian's police arrested Diego Dozan, the leader of our Sao Paulo office, for protecting someone in our community and not turning over a message we couldn't access ourselves. And then the author is like, just so you know, someone in our community is an accused drug trafficker who's threatened to assassinate the judge in this case. But anyway, moving on. Back to Mark's email. As soon as I heard about Diego's arrest, I immediately sent him a message to let him and his family know that we were doing everything we could to get him freed. He sent me the most amazing reply from jail. Quote, "Thank you, Mark. It's an honor." You know, whatever. You can count on me. Mark continues, "Wow. So powerful. That's from someone on our team in jail for protecting our community. I know I can count on Diego, and hopefully you can also feel a little safer communicating with your friends or drug traffickers." I added that because you know people like Diego are fighting for our community, and you know you can count on them too.
There's nothing more heartwarming as an employee than having another coworker get arrested for just doing their job. And you know what? When I think of heartwarming stories, this is probably one of the first that comes to mind because I went to school at Exeter.
Right.
And that's what Exeter taught me. That these are heartwarming stories. You go to jail, you don't fucking rat. Don't rat.
Don't rat. One more point for them to be becoming an organized criminal syndicate. Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches, and we'll cover your legal.
So every other Facebook executive reads this message that he sends out, and they're like, "Dude, you are tripping. No, delete, delete, delete. Do not post." First of all, it's hard to say that you're standing for safety when the government wants these messages so they can prosecute a criminal organization that murders and kidnaps people. And then legal is like, bro, do you realize how badly you're going to piss off Brazilian law enforcement even more? You could be putting Diego in even further jeopardy if you post this. And here's what happens next, according to the author. Mark is not bothered. He still wants to post. Elliot Schrag, who's one of his top executives, sends him a breathless email stating the consensus, in parentheses, rare, among your advisors is do not post this. Too complicated in Brazil and may meaningfully jeopardize Diego and our teams in the country. Mark pushes back and asks Elliot to draft an alternative post that might not be as damaging, which Elliot sends him, advising again that even the alternative risks triggering a negative reaction from the court. Throughout all of this, Mark could not be disappointing, she says. Despite saying in the note that, quote, "we are doing everything to get him free," he does not seem to be worried about Diego in the slightest. He seems to see this, first and foremost, as an opportunity to write a Facebook post. A heartwarming story. If he cared even slightly about Diego's welfare or felt responsible for him as his boss, he wouldn't be insisting on posting his little message to the world, something that could do great harm, before he goes out to dinner. Where do you think he went?
Where do I think he went?
Nobu?
I mean, he's in
there's no
San Francisco. There's
no
Nobu.
Nobu?
No Noibu.
North Boo?
Where do I think he went?
Yeah, as an ex
Bay
Area.
Ooh. Grumpy's.
What's that?
Grumpy's is a great place. It's in North Beach by my old office, and it's you step in and your feet stick to the floor, and you can get a 16-ounce Pabst and a shot of Jameson for like $5. It's recently been redone and looks a lot nicer.
Oh.
But that's where I would have gone.
I want to go where everybody knows my name. The reason I think that this is darker than the China story is because it's a perfect case study for the psychological impacts of wealth and power on the human brain. You know, we talked about this before. Studies show that wealthy and powerful people have difficulty perceiving others' emotions, empathizing with them, empathizing with other human beings. They prioritize personal gain over the needs of others. They're more likely to believe in self-reliance, and they do not want to help others. They're very much like, it's not my problem, you're in this shitty situation mentality. And so now, in 2025, when we have a resource like the Zuckerberg files that has every single thing Mark has said and done that's been posted on the internet over the past 20 years, we can actually see the deterioration of Mark Zuckerberg's brain in real time. Or could you make the other argument, which is that people who have those personality defects in the first place are more likely to become billionaires? And then it's only when they get rich enough and they have fuck you money enough that they take off the mask and they're like, this is who I was all along. What do you think?
I think they're changed throughout.
Yeah.
There's no mask. It's not like a Scooby-Doo episode.
And then comes the 2016 election of Donald Trump and the Cambridge Analytica scandal that follows. So are you ready for corporate gossip number 4?
Yes.
Corporate gossip number 4 is the birth of the lizard boy. So if the Brazilian Facebook employee represented the unmasking of Mark Zuckerberg, then the 2016 Cambridge Analytica scandal was the unmasking of Facebook. This was like when people really realized, beyond just the whistleblowers, beyond the people that were closer to this company, everybody, the public realized, holy shit, Facebook has been lying to us this whole time about fixing their privacy issues, about fixing their security issues. Facebook had such sloppy security that a company was able to harvest personal data from millions of Facebook users and sell that data to organizations that would specifically target voters with misinformation or disinformation. They also let Russian operatives run unchecked on the platform running up to the election, and interference that U.S. investigators at the time called sweeping and systemic. And people were pissed. Mark tries to do some damage control by considering a run for president. He hired Obama's former campaign advisors, visited all 50 states, starting with Iowa and New Hampshire. Here he is hugging people. Ooh.
Heartwarming.
I bet you think if you hugged Mark Zuckerberg, he'd be like in the 70 degrees, depending on how hot the day was.
Yeah, his body temperature is low.
He has like the cool seat
Yeah.
setting where it just kind of blows out cool air. Well, that reputation tour didn't work. In 2018, Senate aides come grab Mark Zuckerberg by the earlobe and they say, you're going to sit right here and you're going to say you're sorry for what you've done. So here Mark is in one of the most, I think, famous pictures of him ever taken. This is Mark Zuckerberg in a 2018 congressional hearing. He looks, in a word, close to death.
Mm-hmm. This is the one where he got all the shit. Oh yeah, you'll run through the shit.
Yes, he gets tons of shit for this. I'd say the only more unnerving picture we've ever seen of a CEO on this podcast is those pictures of Sumner Redstone at 102 or however old he was, looking very close to death on the red carpet of the MTV Movie Awards.
Followed by Herb Kelleher smoking a cigarette while arm wrestling in a white beater.
Herb Kelleher, who died of prostate cancer after smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, looked more alive than Mark Zuckerberg looks in this picture. Mark Zuckerberg looks like a dead person whose eyes have been pinned open. I mean, we got to revisit some of the best tweet reactions to his performance at this hearing, because I don't know, if for some reason you weren't on the internet at the time, you don't realize how viral this went, but this was all the internet was talking about. So here's one from Heather Timmons. She says, there's a picture where she posts that Mark is sitting on a booster seat. He has a booster seat on top of his chair. Someone goes, Jenny Johnson, Mark Zuckerberg just changed his relationship status to diarrhea. Now we're talking about Mark Zuckerberg's really unfortunate haircut. Brandy Jensen says, I appreciate that Zuck has $8 gazillion and still looks like he got his hair cut by his mom. As somebody who got their haircut cut by their mom.
That's what it looked like.
No, I had much longer bangs, but I also had a rat tail. But as somebody with also a big forehead, I have to tell Mark, you have to go like a little bit lower.
Yeah,
So here's another one. At the barbershop, Mark Zuckerberg, less bangs, please. Mark Zuckerberg, even less. Mark Zuckerberg, less. Mark Zuckerberg, I still see some bangs. Keep trimming. God damn it, never stop.
It's like the opposite of a Turkish hair transplant.
Famously, he sweated his way through that testimony and lied as unconvincingly as ever. Remember, he's still got board members Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen waiting for him outside, and they're going to fuck him up if he doesn't tell the truth. And he would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling reporters. I seriously got to give it up to the New York Times. The Observer of London, The Guardian, and Vanity Fair, who all contributed to breaking this story about Cambridge Analytica. And then the hundreds of reporters who kept investigating him and kept holding Mark accountable. And of course, his defense is they hate him because they ain't him. They're like, you're upset that Facebook has destroyed the media publishing industry, and that's why you're mad at me. And so here's this is from Vanity Fair. This is an expose saying that Mark Zuckerberg apparently did not tell Congress the whole truth about Facebook. So here it goes. In the weeks following Zuckerberg's hearings, Facebook said that it has investigated, quote, thousands of apps suspected of misusing user data and suspended hundreds. According to a New York Times investigation, Facebook itself provided phone makers with blanket access to people's private data without getting their consent, even after declaring that it had stopped doing so. In some cases, companies could access data from users' friends, even if those friends had not given permission for their data to be shared.
Yeah, I want to call somebody out, an unsung hero.
Go ahead.
So there's this guy, Alex Stamos. Did you come across him?
In this book.
In that book, yeah. So he was the chief security officer of Facebook, previously from Yahoo, and like incredibly well respected in the security field. So Facebook hires this guy basically as a PR move because he's so well respected, and Facebook had been dealing with privacy issues, and they're like, all right, we're going to hire this guy. We'll let him do his thing. But they don't let him do his thing and essentially tie his hands behind his back. And he's reporting 90% of this privacy, election, Russian issues. He's reporting it, but none of it goes to Cheryl or Mark. So,
or the board of directors, right?
Or the board of directors. So they're all saying, like, we don't know anything about this. And basically lying. He's like, I've provided reports. They might not know about it, but the company knows about it.
I did what I needed to do. I sent it up the chain.
Yeah. And essentially this guy gets fired. But he tried to do the right thing. He did. He tried to get it up to Mark and Cheryl. He could never catch their ear. It always got stopped at their handlers. And he got fired. So this guy knew exactly what was going on. He reported it. He did everything he could have. And Facebook turned around and fired him. And like, this is what they wanted him to. He was trying to do his job. This is what they hired him for.
And that's where they're like, well, anytime a company who's under this much heat, who's like, we have internal auditors who are checking these, right? We have internal investigations. But they're ultimately not going to tell Mark and Cheryl any bad news at all, or the board any bad news at all. Then what's the fucking point?
Yeah.
It's window dressing.
It was appalling to read those chapters in the book because he's like, I not only do I know it's happening, he's like, there are ways to stop it.
Yeah.
And they just let it happen.
Yeah. I mean, if I went through all the times Mark went in front of Congress and lied about what Facebook was doing, and again, whether he knew and lied or didn't know and was ignorant, it actually doesn't matter because he's the CEO and he's responsible for this stuff, right? If I went through and named all those times, this episode would be 20 hours long. So I will leave it to Josh Hawley, who I think covers it pretty well. This is from the Sarah Wynne Williams testimony. So at this point, many people said that Mark should step down. He's a liability, but he didn't. And the board of directors could not fire him because the share structure basically makes that impossible. He held on, he doubled down, and decidedly learned the worst lesson from all of this, which brings us to corporate gossip number 5, which is I now have to dedicate my life to doing so much insane shit that all the tweets about my baby bangs end up buried at the bottom of the internet. So Mark's choices from 2018 on out, and really particularly ramping up, in my opinion, in a huge way in 2022 once Sheryl Sandberg stepped down, are so random and idiotic in every sense. And I think that's because he's hurt and he's desperate. But the board's hands are tied and nobody can save Mark from himself. This is like the Britney Spears dancing in the living room era of Mark Zuckerberg.
Has that era ended for her yet?
I mean, I haven't seen many videos since then, but the problem is this isn't just Britney Spears making videos in her own living room. While Mark is crashing out, we're all trapped on the ride. we all suffer from this. And the next stop is Alpha Boy City. And buckle in, because I wrote this part as if I was in Mark Zuckerberg's brain. And it's like a 10 out of 10 on the unhinged scale, but it's also completely backed up by reporting. None of this is made up. So just make sure you're mentally prepared for this next section, okay? Check in on yourself. Do a body scan before we get into this. So first step, Mark joins the right-wing broligarchy. So in an interview with Kara Swisher, Mark defends Facebook position for keeping outlets like InfoWars on the platform. And he brings up Holocaust deniers, for example, and says, I'm not making this up, quote, they are deeply offensive, but at the end of the day, I don't think our platform should take that down because I think these are things that different people get wrong. I don't think they're intentionally getting it wrong. Swisher was like, you fucking nitwit. Holocaust deniers are intentionally getting it wrong. That's why they're called Holocaust deniers. And this was basically Mark's descent into free speech, how I want it. This is like Jax Taylor. I'm paying for him. I want him how I want him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not Britney's boobs. It's free speech. That's his mentality for Facebook going forward. And that was specifically helpful to one Donald Trump and other newly minted right-wing billionaires. And if you got a problem with it, don't even think about asking me to come to your stupid hearing because I'm not coming. When a UK-led grand committee of 7 countries wanted to press Mark over his concerns about the role Facebook plays in spreading disinformation, he sends some rando, Richard Allen, Facebook's vice president of policy solutions. And when people were angry that Facebook hired an opposition research firm to push back on critics, he pulled that one right out of President Xi's playbook, didn't he? He goes, oh yeah, watch this. Vice President of Global Communications, Elliot Schrag, is going to lay down right in front of the bus and take responsibility for all of it. And then at an employee all hands calls, he calls the New York Times coverage of Facebook bullshit. And then according to Vanity Fair, reportedly blamed COO Sheryl Sandberg and her team for the, quote, hysteria that accompanied the revelation that millions of users' personal data had been siphoned by Cambridge Analytica, complaining that Facebook, quote, wasn't effectively managing the response. Here's the problem when you throw your friends under the bus, Mark. When you throw Richard Allen under the bus, when you throw Elliot Schrag under the bus, when you throw Sheryl Sandberg under the bus, you end up having no friends left. And we'll get to Mark's proposed solution to having no friends left in a little bit. But then he goes, what? You guys don't like the fact that there's hate speech on the site? Kick rocks. I've got a yacht payment to make. And you sickos actually like the hate speech, don't you? Here's another quote from Vanity Fair. There is a wide assumption, not unfounded, that Facebook has a financial stake in leaving total garbage up on its site. Reams of evidence, anecdotal and scholarly, suggest that its newsfeed algorithm rewards inflammatory and addictive content, even as the company has vowed over the past year to prioritize, quote, local, meaningful, and informative content. A shameless British clickbait site called Lad Bible, I love that name, constantly ranks as its top publisher. I wonder what gave Vanity Fair the idea that Mark Zuckerberg would engage in ethically questionable behavior in pursuit of revenue. Maybe was it the time that he allegedly gave in to the Vietnam government's censorship demands to avoid losing an estimated $1 billion in annual revenue from the country, according to the Washington Post? And he personally decided to censor Facebook posts from anti-Vietnamese government pages because he argued to take Facebook offline in Vietnam would do more harm to free speech than censoring anti-government posts. Oh, wait. Did I say free speech? I meant money speech. You can't speak unless it makes me money. And not only am I going to make sure that you can't talk shit about me anymore, I'm going to make sure you can't think shit about me either. That's right. Again, according to Vanity Fair, Mark was bankrolling research into developing technology intended to read people's thoughts. This was University of California, San Francisco scientists involved affixing electrodes into the brain of human volunteers, asking them questions, and then attempting to determine what they were about to say by analyzing their brain activity. Here's Mark again. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to hook you up to my brain fucking electrodes and ask you, what do you think about my new body? Now that I've been doing UFC fighting, do you think I'm hot now or not? Tell me the truth. Actually, it doesn't even matter what you think I look like in real life because I'm going to make a new reality. It's called the metaverse and everyone's going to love it. And we won't need art anymore because I quote, basically any art in the future won't actually need to exist physically. It can just be an app that your glasses project on the wall. Direct quote from Mark Zuckerberg in 2021, I think. Look at me. I haven't looked at art or read a book since I was 19. And I'm fine. Don't look at me like that. You think I'm the devil, don't you? You think I'm Satan, don't you? Okay? Would a satanic person have their wife run damage control and give an interview to the Times of London in which she calls herself Mark Zuckerberg's moral compass and explains that our hearts are actually in philanthropy?
His muse.
That's right. Philanthropy. We donated $100 million to open a school in Newark, where we spent most of the money on expensive educational consultants and laptops for kids. And we didn't talk to their parents because what do they know? And big whoop, people think it was a failure. We still tried. And ain't that worth something? Can a guy get a tax break around here without all the fucking accountability? Jesus. I love kids and I want to help them make me money. I didn't mean it like that. Kids just happen to love Instagram. And I'm helping them by creating, according to a 2023 federal lawsuit, a highly manipulative algorithm to make sure they are always getting dopamine hit after dopamine hit. Whatever, fuck this. From now on, if you want to mess with me, you're going to have to go through them. That's right. This is my celebrity AI army. Ask the one I created as a facsimile of Kendall Jenner. Her name is Billy, and she posts AI-generated latte art, and she thinks I'm super hot. Ask her. Ask her if she thinks I'm hot. She also says I'm really fun to be around. Watch me. Here we go. This is a $1 billion product that everyone will love. Here's my advertising for it. I'm acting completely normal throughout the entire thing.
What can I help you with today?
Well, my parents are coming over for family dinner in a bit, and I need to figure out what to cook. I've got some steaks, some ribs, and some sausages.
I recommend a smoked barbecue feast with honey bourbon sauce.
We thought we'd come early and help with dinner.
I'm so down for dinner. Let's make something delicious. I'm team barbecue.
Fuck! Everybody hated those! 10 months after the release, the AI chatbots had to be disabled. Okay, well, you know who will never be disabled? Dana White. I gave him a seat on my board and $12 million, but he actually said that he would be my friend either way. He said it didn't matter. He would still hang out with me, even if I didn't give him I gave him $1.2 million, not 12, but I would give him 12 probably. So now I have two friends, okay? I have Dana and Priscilla. And that really got me thinking. I tried to reflect and I was thinking actually, I'm just going to put in the clip here.
There's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends. 3 people that they'd consider friends. And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's 15 friends or something, right?
I'm kind of letting you go here.
Okay, this is Becca again. I'm going to spare you the following several minutes of nonsense rambling and spoil Mark's idea, which is just a return to chatbots that he just shut down a year ago. Here's a quote from Mark about this new AI friends that he's trying to develop. He says, "The world will adjust to a demand for AI friends, and we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable and why the people who are doing these things, why they are rational for doing it, and how it is adding value for their lives." You should listen to this entire interview, by the way. It is so rambling. He makes no sense. Basically what he's saying is my AI chatbots from a year ago, they were actually just way too early. People weren't isolated enough. and they just need the vocabulary to explain why they're so lonely and why they actually do need chatbot friends. I'll give you the vocabulary, Mark. Let me help you out here. You created a tool that isolated us. You created a tool that divided us. You have no friends, and everyone hates you because you are an adult loser with no personality. And now you're trying to monetize your own experience of being a complete societal outcast. Here, I'll save you $1 billion in R&D. Get a therapist. Join a club. Stop terrorizing us with your insecure, maladaptive daydreams, you fucking weirdo. Oh, sorry. And scene. I think I'm going to just wrap it there. I have to say, there was so much more. I really had to cut so much down for size because there is so much more about Mark Zuckerberg that I could have added. And I'm sure each of you knows a little bit of tidbit that you're wishing that I had incorporated into this episode. It's possible I might do a Patreon with even more shit that didn't make the main feed. So keep an eye out for that. But are you ready for the takeaways?
Yeah, let's do the takeaways.
I don't know what mine are so much takeaways as they are just additional thoughts that didn't make it in. But I think that Google still hates Mark Zuckerberg because if you Google Mark Zuckerberg right now, this is the first image that you see when you Google
Oh,
him.
wow, that's really funny.
He looks like a 23-year-old,
Yeah.
40-year-old. And then the other thing is, I just want to touch on the board of directors because when you just like list the shitty things that this company has done, you could replace the word Meta with the name of like an international crime syndicate, and I would not know the difference. Like, I understand that because of the share structure, you can't kick Mark out, but whenever Mark does eventually see the inside of a jail cell for any number of crimes against humanity that he has committed, they should be in the cell right next door. This is an absolute failure of corporate governance. And I don't even think you can use the word corporate governance. It's corporate enablement at its finest. What are your takeaways?
My takeaways, okay, so I mentioned a few of my takeaways, which were about Alex Stamos, about Mark needing a mentor. But the one thing that wasn't touched on for me was this Chris Hughes op-ed, which I messaged you about yesterday. So Chris Hughes was Mark's former roommate and listed as co-founder. And he wrote a fantastic op-ed on the New York Times, basically calling for Facebook to be split up. Exactly what's happening.
6 years ago.
In 2019, he called for Facebook.
The lawsuit, that came out in 2019. The antitrust lawsuit came out in 2020.
Yeah, so he's basically calling for it, and it apparently, according to this book, sent Mark in a spiral that his friend would do such a thing. So in this op-ed, which I highly recommend you read, talks about how Mark has all this unchecked power, mainly over speech, but also over any meaningful competition. Mark surrounds himself with yes men. And Facebook's fear is Facebook's not afraid of like any other rules.
Yeah.
Like they can deal with rules. What they are afraid of is antitrust. So this is truly the only way. And this will deter other companies as well and then create more competition. So I think it's a really interesting read. He also calls for a data protection government agency, which the EU already...
GDPR.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're way ahead in that. And I mean, the European Union has levied millions of dollars of fines on Meta. But again, it's just the cost of doing business. This data is so valuable for them that even if they get fined from the EU or even America, it doesn't matter because they can sell the data at a higher price than the fine is.
Yeah. Well, we hope that they break them up.
So we will do a follow-up on the antitrust Meta lawsuit, which is effectively determining whether Facebook employed a buyer-bury strategy, which is any type of behavior at a company that's like monopolistic in its intention, whether or not it actually ends up creating a monopoly or not, is illegal. So we will find out. The trial is ongoing. Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg have already testified. And yeah, we're going to do, I think, a deep dive on that trial in particular next week and all the implications on it.
Yeah, let's leave it there.
Okay. Wow. What a freaking journey. Are you guys ready for some good news? So this is from Elizabeth Liu, who is our good news correspondent. If you have any good news ideas for her, you can email her at the link in the show notes. Okay, so this is inside a union's fight against Trump's federal job cuts. This is from the New York Times, and she summarizes it as such. And she summarizes it with this report. She says, the American Federation of Government Employees represents the unions of more than 800,000 federal workers. Their membership varies from research in the Environmental Protection Agency to offices in the Border Patrol. Unlike traditional unions, government workers have little to no bargaining power. They cannot go on strike, negotiate their salaries, and membership is voluntary. After Trump's recent cut to the federal government, union membership rose, and local union leaders are fighting back against his actions. Corey Trammell is the union leader for Local 2957, which represents the Oakdale Federal Corrections Institute in Louisiana, the largest union of federal workers. Recently, the Bureau of Prisons announced it would no longer allow dues to be deducted from paychecks, and the union's membership shrank from 200 to 50 paying members. Since then, Trammell has been working around the clock to address the concerns of his members and keep his union alive. In Michigan, Brian Kelly works for the Environmental Protection Agency and has seen a rise in union membership since the beginning of Trump's presidency. Kelly has spent most of his time running union workshops to account for the influx of new members. Local leaders like Kelly and Trammell are fighting with their communities to keep their jobs and maintain our essential government systems. If you are interested in supporting federal employees, Kelly would encourage you to contact your local representative and voice your support. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that good news. I will say yesterday at the May Day protests, there were tons of union banners and lots of different unions there. I actually walked with the New York City Transportation Union, and they were really fun to walk with. But there was all different types of unions. So yeah, definitely call your congressperson and make sure that unions are supported. So, all right, we will end it there. You guys know where to find us, and we will see you next week. Bye.